Welcome to the Stories Told podcast. This is episode 67. They Had Me at Metrocity. This is the Stories Told podcast. Two authors talking about stories in movies, TV, and of course, books.
I'm Michael Grayford. I write action-adventure stories in fantasy and sci-fi worlds, sometimes for younger readers and sometimes for adults. And I try to always inject at least a little bit of humor.
And I am author E.W. Barnes, and I write action-adventure, time travel novels, and space opera science fiction. Thousands of years, thousands of worlds. But be forewarned, beyond here, there will be spoilers. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's begin. Welcome back to the Stories Told podcast. I'm author E.W. Barnes, and with me is author Michael Grayford. And today we're talking about the story told in the film Megamind. How are you doing today, Mike?
I am fantastic. How are you?
I am good as well, thank you. And what's new in your writing world?
New in the writing world. Let's see. I've set up some discount promotions for Zara 1. And I'm just getting my brain back into the world of editing my sci-fi story, The Deep Dark, and working on other miscellaneous stuff, getting Zara 2 pushed through, trying to come up with some ideas for the cover, things like that. What about you? What is going on in your writing world?
I've been working on some promotions as well. Like many authors, I have what are called reader magnets, which are shorter stories that introduce a reader to the universe of our novels, and we offer them in exchange for readers signing up for the newsletter. So I have two reader magnets. One is for my time travel series, the Templar Protection Corps series, and the other is for my space opera science fiction series, The Adventures of the Empyrean Guard. And so I've got those reader magnets going out in various different places as part of group promotions with other authors to invite people to join the newsletter. So that's what I've been working on, is getting those reader magnets out and promoting the promotions on behalf of the other authors so that we can all share our stories with people and invite people to join our newsletters. So that's what I've been working on.
That's great. Yeah, I still need to work on my own little short story to pull some readers in. Haven't created one yet.
Well, be sure to let us know when that's ready to go.
All right.
As a reminder to our listeners, you can read The Adventures of the Empyrean Guard, which is my space opera science fiction series, and that is available on Patreon as it's being written, so you can see how the drafting process goes. You can also read Mike's Tales of Zara, which is available on Amazon in both episodic format on Kindle Vella as well as ebook and paperback, and those links are in the show notes. So have you come across any interesting books, movies, or television lately?
Let's see. No, I haven't. I've only been reading some general nonfiction books, like one about sleeping, like Why We Sleep, I think it's called, something like that. But that's it. I haven't latched onto any other cool sci-fi or fantasy stories in the last week. How about you?
I am still reading Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive series for the second time, and I'm still in book 3. I'll probably finish up book 3 here in the next week. And I also have been watching, of course, Star Trek Discovery as it's being released. This is its last season, season 5. They did 5 seasons, I believe. And so I don't know which, I think I'm on episode 6 or 7 out of the 10 episodes they're producing this season. So that's what I've been watching mostly there.
Oh yeah, I'll have to. I watched up to a point, and then they hadn't released a new episode yet, so they have by now, I'm sure. So I'll have to watch the next one.
Yeah. So are you ready to talk about Megamind?
I am. Let's go.
Today we're talking about the story told in Megamind, and I will read the description that comes up on Google when you type in Megamind. Though he is the most brilliant supervillain the world has known, Megamind is the least successful. Thwarted time and again by heroic Metro Man, Megamind is more surprised than anyone when he actually manages to defeat his longtime enemy. But without Metro Man, Megamind has no purpose in life. So he creates a new opponent, who quickly decides that it's more fun to be bad than a hero. Did you like this movie?
Oh yeah, this is a fun movie. I think they had me at Metrocity. It's just a good. I love puns and playing with words, and that was just such a good one. Yeah, there's great humor throughout. I love the setup and where they go with the story. I also loved how they played off of Superman, the original Superman, where they fire him off of the dying planet, and then he ended up becoming the villain over there. And then later again with the Marlon Brando impression of the Space Dad character, how they tied those in. I thought that was funny. Yeah, but I love the idea that of the villain creating their own hero. He's just like bored. He has no purpose. Like, oh, okay, we need a new hero to fight against. I thought this was really, very clever, very fun. Thought his little weird fish minion was a great character. I love the plot twist. I guess there's a couple plot twists with Metro Man. First is like, he's dead. Like, oh, he killed him. That's cool. And then, oh, wait, he's back. I love that he faked his own death. That was funny too. But overall, I thought they had great character work throughout. Though it was a sort of cartoon, superhero-y movie, there wasn't so much superheroing going on. It was more about the characters and the struggles they face, in particular, the Megamind character, obviously. And I thought they did a great job with that. I thought they handled sort of the developing romance very well also. They didn't go too overboard with it. It was just a lot of fun. I think the story works. I think there's good payoffs at the end. And what did you think? Do you like this movie?
I love this movie. It's just such a darling movie with a wonderful story. And it seems like it's a simplistic story, but there are so many great layers to this story and so many different ways that you can sort of analyze the characters, who they are and how they impact the story. I think that's incredibly well done. They could have made this kiddie and relied on the references that you pointed out, the very sort of clever references to Superman and pulling in people saying, oh, look at this, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, we've got Superman references here. But they added that as just a fun layer rather than the only thing to pull people in. Instead, they had such good character development, such good character growth and arcs that it's a much more complex story than it appears. I love how Megamind took his, this is kind of a nature versus nurture story, right? His nature is actually to be good, but the nurture was all about being bad, and so that was the path he took. And this was an opportunity for him to recover the good that is his nature and rely on that and use that in such a unique way. And it makes you wonder, if Lex Luthor had gotten a chance to be a good guy, would he? I also like how Roxanne Ritchie is not, she's Lois Lane was supposed to be very independent, but in the 30s, she still needed to be rescued. And Roxanne doesn't usually need to be rescued. She's like, really, I'm okay. I may be tied up, but I'm still okay.
Yeah. She's like, I've been here before.
Right. The only thing that I kind of wonder about is Hal. Hal is deeply creepy, and he doesn't seem to have an arc in this story. And I think I would have liked to have had an arc for him, but we can talk about that a little bit more later on in the podcast. So I think that's pretty much it. This is a great story. It's a fun story. I think it's constructed well. Most of the story is a flashback, right? We start off with him falling in the air, and then the present story is only like 10 minutes, if less, 5 minutes or less, but the rest of it is a flashback. And I think it's very well done. And I agree, it's got a nice hand on the romance. It's got a nice blend of funny It's very funny, but there's also a lot of heart in it. Yeah, good movie. Is there anything you might have changed? Because I started to talk a little bit about that. We can maybe jump into that unless there's anything else you want to add about what you liked.
Yeah, I'm very curious to hear what you say. I only had like one tiny thing. I think I'm going to agree with you when you give what you would improve. So maybe we can talk about that more in a minute. The only thing that I saw that came to mind was actually at the end of the movie, after the movie's basically over, there's sort of the mid-credits scene where Bernard wakes up and then, Minion thumps him. I felt like they did Bernard dirty there.
Yeah.
He didn't need to like knock the guy out. I mean, he was already, went on this whole mess that he was involved in through no fault of his own. I don't know. I didn't like that part. Beyond that, I thought it's a very tight script and each scene felt important. There's no fluff. It just tells its story and does it well. So, okay. So you go. What was the thing that you wanted to improve or things?
I agree with you about the forget me stick. If you guys are supposed to be being good now and the heroes, you don't go be hitting people with the forget me stick.
Yeah.
Isn't that what they called it? The forget me stick?
Yeah, something like that.
I agree with that. But I think what might have been helpful is if Hal had some kind of an arc that, besides just going from deeply creepy, semi-stalky camera guy to full-on villain, I would have liked to have seen something. I don't know. I don't know what it would have been. I don't know how you would have done that because Megamind needs a bad guy to fight against. And he gets his wish. He gets the bad guy to fight against. It just isn't what he was looking for. But to me, they did such a great job of making all these characters three-dimensional, except for Hal. Hal was very kind of two-dimensional, and I'm not entirely sure how to make him three-dimensional. Do you have any suggestions for that? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question because, I mean, the one thing he wanted was affection from Roxanne, right?
Yeah.
And then he gets his powers. Now he's this big, tough superhero who can fly around, do all these things. And she wants no part of him. So his reaction is, well, what else can I have, right? If I didn't get that, where else can I go? And then he takes it to the dark side, which I think makes sense for his character. But you're right, it doesn't really change much. It's just sort of the next evolution of where you would expect someone like that to go. So it makes sense. But you're right. I kind of thought that too at the end. Now that you mention it, maybe there was something else to kind of wake him up toward the end of the movie or at the end of the movie, even after he was caught potentially.
Yeah.
But we didn't get that. And I don't know. I didn't miss that necessarily, but I do see what you're saying.
Yeah. And it doesn't take away from the story. Again, it's simply that the rest of the characters are so well developed that if I had to add something, it would be to try to develop Hal too.
I think it's because of the contrast with Megamind, right? Megamind is he's the villain of the story, right?
Yeah.
He's the bad guy, even though he's kind of just playing around, doesn't seem to actually cause at least harm to people, maybe harm to stuff. But because we see them, because we see him transform, there's, you have the contrast of Hal who doesn't do that.
Yeah.
And so it felt a little weird in context of this story. Like, okay, so he's just like a bad guy and that's it, I guess.
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying there.
Yeah. So what kind of themes did you identify in Megamind?
Oh, the theme. I bounced around on a couple of things. But here's where I settled. And I want to see what you think about this. My theme, I like to do stating a sentence of universal truth, right? Here's the message of what this story, here's the message the story is telling you. And hopefully it's not necessarily hitting you over the head with it, but it's there if you look for it. So here's what I came up with. You can only become your best self by being yourself. And the reason I say that is because we see Megamind take on these other roles throughout the story. And even in the climactic scene, he takes on the role of Metro Man when he's fighting the villain. But ultimately, he succeeds when he finally drops all pretense and defeats the true villain of the story as himself, as Megamind. So that's what I had. You only become your best self by being yourself. What do you come up with?
That's brilliant. I think that's a great observation. I didn't even think about that, about how he put on all these personas throughout. Even his Megamind is a persona.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
That's
that's a
true.
brilliant observation. Well done. Mine was related to the nature versus nurture piece, but I think yours is better because it really
All right.
pulls
Let's hear
in.
the nature versus nurture. So nature versus nurture, which you talked about before,
Right.
of
Because
being able to overcome that.
or recognize it and then making choices that can be separated from the nurture. If your nature is one way and your nurture is directing you to something else, being able to step back and recognize it and then make choices based on your nature, which is what he started to do
Yeah.
because of his relationship with Roxy. She's the one that
Yeah.
allowed him to explore his nature in an environment that wasn't related to his nurture. But
I
I
think
think
that's actually connected to what I said.
I agree. And I think it's a subset of what you said. What you said, I think, is a very global theme that really encompasses the entirety of the lesson to be learned. So as a writer, what do you take away from this story?
My takeaway is very simple. I think this is a tight story and it works. So my takeaway is don't pad your story with too much extraneous fluff. I think there's a tendency sometimes to have side plot here and distraction over here. You try to add things to flesh out the story, but you have to remember to bring those things back to feed the central story, the central theme, the central plot. And I think this movie does that really well. So that's my takeaway. What do you take away?
My takeaway is that I can't think of right now a story that we have talked about where we have essentially a character arc for the villain who then is the hero, who becomes the hero. Is there any other story that you can think of?
I don't think so. Not that we've discussed yet.
Yeah, so to me, my takeaway is that this is also an option for storytelling and for a good story, and that is starting with the villain and have the villain have the arc into a hero. That's one of the things that makes this story so unique and interesting, is that he's the bad guy, but he's really the good guy who becomes the good guy.
Yeah, I like your writing takeaway better. I'm stealing that one. I think it works here because they set him up as an interesting. It's a similar thing with The Martian, right? The character is likable, even though he's the bad guy. It's like you're following his POV and you really like this character as you're working with him. And I think they're able to pull that off. If you have someone who's truly evil, I think it's a lot harder to do that with.
Yeah.
I've seen stories try to do that, and oftentimes it doesn't really feel right. Like, was that character really redeemable after the stuff that they did? I don't know.
Yeah.
But here, I think it. Yeah, I think it works, and I think that's a great writing takeaway.
Thank you for joining us as we talked about the story told in Megamind. A big thank you to our Patreon supporters and all our subscribers. We're so grateful for your support and your encouragement. The Stories Told podcast is available on multiple podcast platforms, and we thank you for liking and subscribing or following, depending on where you're listening. It may not be a big deal to you, but it means a lot to us. If you have a favorite book, movie, or TV series you'd like to suggest for the podcast, leave a comment on the YouTube channel, and that link is in the show notes. You can find Michael Grayford at michaelgrayford.com and E.W. Barnes at 1000years.com, and those links are also in the show notes. Join us next time as we discuss the story told in Foundation, Seasons 1 and 2. Thank you so much, Mike. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you.
And we'll see you next time on the Stories Told podcast.